Eskom has today downgraded load shedding to stage 5. That will continue until tomorrow morning. But the country is facing much bigger problems on the energy front. This week, the power utility implemented stage 6 blackouts, citing a further breakdown at several of its power stations. Unit 1 at the Koeberg nuclear power station is due to be shut tomorrow. That will be shut for refueling and maintenance for up to 6 months. Let's talk about this now with energy expert Ted Blom. Ted, a very good afternoon to you. Grateful for your time today. So Koeberg, this unit was meant to be taken offline yesterday already for this refueling and maintenance progress, delayed to Saturday. What difference does that make to the power situation really?
Well, if you go back to Wednesday evening, Eskom actually was at stage 7 load shedding. And if they'd taken Koeberg off on yesterday morning, then we would have been at stage 8 level load shedding for sure. So Eskom, I believe there was political intervention overnight, and Eskom was told that they cannot commence with Koeberg because the government doesn't want to be embarrassed by level 8 load shedding. So that is why Eskom deferred it. But the fact of the matter is it's kicking the can down the road. With no diesel there's no buffer to shield the consumers, and that's why we're having all this erratic load shedding up and down, up and down. And on top of that, the schedule that Eskom is implementing is really messing with people's inverters and batteries as they try and use their backup systems, because the backup systems can't run for 4 hours non-stop. It can only run for about 2 hours, and then they need recharging. And I've asked Eskom to change their schedules, but of course it's fallen on deaf ears because Eskom doesn't consider the customer.
What would be the solution then, given that what Eskom is saying is that it's a rapidly changing situation as far as the unplanned breakdowns in particular? So how would they be able to change the schedules in a very practical way that is sufficient to avoid this feared complete collapse of the grid?
Okay, so, I mean, what they really should do, and I mean, I can't understand it, that the bells aren't ringing in some people's heads. They give themselves up as professionals and experts and all sorts of nonsense like that. But the fact of the matter is anybody else, anywhere in the world, would have called for emergency supplies of energy. Beirut had that massive explosion, and within 7 days, power was restored with the emergency supplies that was flown in. I sat down with Eskom, the proposal in 2019. The executive that was in charge at the time, or was delegated the job of being in charge, told me, don't hold your breath, just watch the space, we'll be back soon. Now that's more than 3 years ago and nothing has happened. And now the wheels have really come off. And if we can get 1 gigawatt every 3 weeks, which is what the capability of the emergency suppliers is, we could avert the load shedding completely. But we know if you consistently manage by people who have rocks in their heads, well, then expect the worst. I'm sorry to say.
Where would we get this emergency power from, and how quickly would we be able to tap into that resource?
Okay, so there are organizations around the world that typically deal in humanitarian situations like earthquakes or floods or tsunamis or whatever, and they can restore the power depending on what the demand is, at the rate of at least 1 gigawatt every three weeks. They fly it in, and provided you can sort out your permits and your EIAs, and you can lay a concrete slab, which will take about 2 days to harden, they can erect and install and tie you into the grid in under 3 weeks at the rate of 1 gigawatt every 3 weeks. If you obviously at a higher rate, at a higher tariff, they can probably do more than that. But typically, when they deal with humanitarian situations, the situation is very dire. Yeah, I believe we could do better than that, and we could probably have 3 to 5 gigawatts installed within the space of about 5 to 6 weeks. But then you need everybody's cooperation. You need hands on decks, and you need to stop to all this hot air coming from the politicians. And I mean, like it's just happened now. We've had this Energy Crisis Council now for more than 6 months, and absolutely nothing has happened. Now you've got the president asking the board to start acting and doing their day job. I mean, it's actually pathetic the way we as the customers are being treated.
So just on that, Ted,
really,
so if we were to go the route you're suggesting, we obviously would not be in a humanitarian scenario because comparable to Beirut, because ours would not have been brought on by a disaster, but rather a long-standing issue with the grid, right? But you're saying we'd be able to perhaps procure some of this power or find some other agreement. Between that and what we had been reliant on, which were the emergency diesel reserves, which would be the quickest route to getting us out of the more severe levels of load shedding? Would it be easier to just get diesel?
Okay, so the quicker route would be diesel, but that's limited to 3 gigawatts because that's the installed capacity that we've got available on the ground. So that will still not take you out of the total load shedding scenario, which in my view will certainly touch level 8 or stage 8 before the 1st of April if we carry on with the incompetent management at Eskom as we are at the moment. But also the emergency supplies that I can procure come in much cheaper than what the pathetic rates are that Eskom is charging the customers or factoring in the cost at 7 rand a kilowatt hour. Much, much cheaper. And I've got a funding plan for it as well. I would have thought that those clever executives at Eskom and Treasury who will get paid multi-million rand salaries would have by now thought of a way to fund the diesel. It's actually quite simple, and it's something that can be done by executive order within 24 hours. But of course, if you're sitting with incompetent people in cadre deployment, you'll never get an answer from these people.
Let's go back to Koeberg then, that unit that's going to be switched off tomorrow for refueling and maintenance will be off for a period of 6 months. Is it possible to extend or delay, in fact, the maintenance work that needs to happen? Or would the fact that it's specifically a nuclear facility pose great risk if we delayed it, let's say, by another week, a month?
No, I mean, you can probably delay it by another week or two, but not more than that. The critical deadline for recommissioning of Unit 1 and 2, they botched up when they tried to do the same exercise earlier on in the year. I don't know if you recall that. It's totally messed up. Eskom's got a terrible track record on doing capital projects or refurbishment projects. A terrible, terrible track record. And I would guess that they're already on the critical path as far as refurbishing these units are concerned. And I would guess that they need every spare day they can to make sure that they meet the July 2024 deadline. Failing which, that license will expire. And I'm sure that all the greenies will try their best to stop Eskom from reacquiring a license. So if they don't make it now, it's goodbye to Koeberg. So I wouldn't want to put that at risk, given that Eskom's probably going to have major slippage in their program anyway, similar to what they've had with the Unit 2 disastrous exercise that they messed up earlier in the year.
You spoke earlier about political intervention, and yesterday the Public Enterprises Minister, Pravin Gordhan, basically confirmed that he'd had a word with the Eskom board, basically an instruction to get the country out of stage 6 power cuts. We're now on stage 5. We used less power, we know, over the weekend. He also spoke about potential sabotage. How much do you think sabotage is to blame for where we are?
No, Eskom's crying foul or crying wolf over nothing. The low-level sabotage or criminality or corruption has been going on in Eskom for the best part of 20 years. They have not had one prosecution for sabotage. So I think they're crying wolf. They're trying to just hide under the covers. And the level 5 load shedding that we have today is not as a consequence of Pravin Gordhan's instruction to the board. It was predetermined. If you go to the Eskom notices earlier in the week, they already, because Friday and most industry switches off, they already took the chance and said we'll be at level 5 load shedding today. So it's not from intervention from Minister Gordhan.
How helpful has he been in this situation?
Some reports.
How helpful has the minister, cabinet and government as a whole, how helpful have they been in dealing with the crisis?
Absolutely unhelpful. If they just kept their snouts out of the trough and their grubby hands out of the trough as well as their comrades, we would have not been in this disastrous situation. This disastrous situation has been because of stupid appointments, incompetent management, incompetent staff philosophy, not bringing in the 300 people that have volunteered to go back to Eskom who have solid experience. I think they've employed less than a dozen of those people, and by and large, following stupid ideology, which has now landed us so deep in the drain, I don't know if we'll ever get out of it.
Ted Blom, energy expert, thank you for your time today.